Hello, everybody. Hey, how's it going?
What strikes me about many of your characters up until Nocturnal Animals is that they are often boys or men coming to grips with unacceptable circumstances and facing choices. I'm wondering if, as you're reading the script and as you're preparing for the role, do you see that moment when they can go from one thing to another? Do you pinpoint that beat and prepare for it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Can I break down the character instantly from the screenplay? Generally, I would already have some kind of natural reaction to the script. Like I relate to the character, or I've just been on this journey, and and then that's kind of how you know whether you want to do the project or not, because you've felt you've gone on a journey, you've felt emotionally attached to this character, and then so in which case you go on that trajectory, but you can't really essentially do that kind of groundwork, or at least if you do, you're an actor who's just you're just working for yourself. The thing is, I guess a lot of people don't understand or have trouble with is that acting is a process, and it's a collaboration, and it really comes down with the filmmaker and the director. So you got to discover it together. It might feel like it's on page 68 and it's at this monumental event or this moment, but it might actually come sooner when you're making it, and you just never know. And they might just find that they want to discover it later on in the edit. So you really don't have control of when when there's a pinnacle moment in which that happens. But yeah, you got to feel instinctively to it from the beginning, from the get-go. Otherwise, there is no input. You can't. You gotta draw from somewhere. So yeah.
Yeah, you've got to feel that pull right away when you read the script.
Absolutely, yeah. And obviously, yeah, I was drawn to a lot of characters who go on an arc and have a dynamic and a journey and an obstacle and what have you. Most lead characters are going to do that anyway. A lot of characters around that don't have that sort of arc, but yeah.
Yeah. Now, you are 26 and you have 2 decades, 20 years of acting experience. We're going to get into a lot of that tonight, which is really extraordinary to think about. When you were 6, your first acting experience on... It's like this is your life, right?
Yeah, I'm ready to retire, by the way. I'm already...
Don't retire. There's so much more to come from you. There's so much great stuff. But in Inspector Calls, you were 6 years old, right? You were doing it. There was a quote that you gave where you said you were going on stage about the time that most 6-year-olds were going to bed, and then you're kind of coming home at midnight. I'm wondering, when you were doing Inspector Calls, did you feel at that point that that was your calling, or that in some ways your calling had found you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I could comprehend what I was really doing at 6 years old. But the beauty of it, that and I've got kids, and my daughter is, I've got a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I couldn't imagine that she'd be doing what I was doing. It's almost like child labor, I guess. The What's beautiful, though, being a child and doing that, is it really comes from deep within, a passion. There's nothing more to it than feeling alive on stage and being able to just take direction at an early age, do what I was supposed to do, and and have the stamina and the energy to do it every 3 times a week, I think, at that time. And then I lived outside of the city. I think it was a show in the West End in London, sorry, and I lived outside of the city. So I'd have a chaperone who would drive me up. We'd do the show, the curtain call would leave, and yeah, I'd be back at home by midnight, school in the morning, like any other kid's normal routine, with no sort of whisper of what I'd been doing the night before.
Yeah. Did it feel like play? Did it feel like you were able to kind of go and play at like another level as a 6-year-old?
Yeah, I mean, it was an adult world. It was a whole experience and adventure, and it was exciting. I was that kind of kid. I was very sociable, um, and energetic. I always think the reason why I fell into this thing is that the activities that I did outside of my school was it was that my parents would have a break because I was just like this mad energy. So they'd try and tire me out by having gymnastics and martial arts and swimming and acting and dance, and by the end of the week, and I'd be going up and down for auditions and what have you, but became the lifestyle, and what I guess my parents did was just enable those opportunities and encourage what I love doing, and that's probably one of the best bit of parenting that they've ever passed on to me.
What I love is that as part of your parents' plan to get your energy out, it was also do that play that Stephen Daldry is directing. So it's like there's gymnastics, there's running around, the Daldry play, and I just love that.
Yeah, I mean it's quite funny in hindsight. That was my first thing I did. It was Stephen Daldry, and I reminded him when I bumped into him about a year ago and said I was that boy who opened the trap door, and he was like quite shocked and said that's incredible, and I knew we had a connection in some way. So that was kind of nice.
Yeah. Well, you did so much more British stage work after that, and British TV and movies, including a small role in Shanghai Nights, in which you look at Owen Wilson and Jackie Chan, and you say, "I'm Charlie Chaplin," which is actually a terrific little moment in a terrific film. You also said that that you always felt comfortable being other people, not yourself. Like that sort of was a comfortable thing. One of the reasons that acting appealed to you is you're able to kind of be somebody else. Is that still part of the appeal for acting for you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the beauty in it. It's the fantasy to indulge and dive into and study, people and characters, and be able to go on ludicrous journeys that I probably wouldn't do in my personal life. And I think from an early age it was like an escapism, really, and therapeutic, and so.
Yeah, it's an interesting quote, though, the idea that you're always more confident as somebody else. And then because it takes a lot of confidence to play the young John Lennon in Nowhere Boy, which you guys saw a clip from. The film is so insightful about Lennon's early years. What were some of the keys to you, Aaron, about John Lennon as you were kind of diving into him and preparing for the role? What were some of the keys to that performance?
Ooh, the beauty about that script was it was a standalone script. It didn't actually need to be connected to Lennon in any way. It was already powerful and moving. It was written by Matt Greenhouse, and he's a phenomenal writer. So it was just on its own a standalone coming-of-age story about a young man discovering his mother and love and adolescence and what his position in the world was. I mean, it was so complex and dynamic and deep and so many layers. And then added to that, there was, obviously, it was Lennon. So, but the interesting thing about it was that it was probably the only part of Lennon's life that wasn't documented. So, and I think it ends at the end of the movie when they go off to Hamburg, and then that's probably the earliest time you can start in documentaries, But so it was like my mission to study and grasp as much of Lennon's mannerisms, his voice, his humor, his anger. He had a lot of rage and anger, obviously, after his mother died, and which was difficult because then we're working backwards, because it's sort of, it was great knowing that. Actually, the funny discovery was actually the relationship that he had with Yoko later on in his life, when he felt secure and loved, was actually quite inspirational for quite a lot of his early childhood, because I think it felt like he found peace and love and security, and so I used quite a lot of that to bring into his sort of childhood. What else was important? Important to me that I learned how to play the guitar. I sang.
You didn't do either one of those really before that. I mean, you
No, I
did that.
didn't. I mean, I didn't. In fact, I think So I was having to learn rock and roll chords and things, and that was great. Y- yeah, I mean, so yeah, it was a mixture of things. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, there's so much going on there. In fact, one of the scenes I love is there's a scene outside of John's house, and yourself and Thomas Brody Sangster, who plays Paul McCartney, are outside, and Paul says, we have to write our own lyrics, and you as John say, I write. And there's so much going on in your face at that moment. There's sort of pride, as I write, but then there's also then he turns to Paul and he says, poems and stories, and he's sort of confused, but also sort of in a way, sort of in awe of the depth that is required, that he writes this stuff, and Paul's talking about something else. It's a really beautiful moment, and it shows the tricky interior life that you sort of had to show. You kind of had to telegraph what was going on in the future, but also live him in that moment, right?
Right, yeah, and I think there was a few things kind of going on. I think there was sort of he sort of there was a sensitive side obviously to Lennon, and I think he never really wanted to come across as like a softie or anything. I think it was just sort of obviously would that be embarrassing if he admitted that he wrote poetry or what have you? Or I mean, and also sort of discovering a new friendship and a new possible. I mean, there was quite a lot actually to. What I love is that also at the time there was the effect of Elvis came out, and the effect that he had on women, and the effect that it had on his mum, or the excitement of rock and roll, and it was almost like he just needed to equate the two. It's like, okay, so I don't know if he really cared so much about like, okay, Elvis gets the attention of women, I need to be like him, or it was more like I need to be like him because he gets the attention of my mum. And there was so many dynamics like that were really interesting, which I mean, were great for me as an actor. I mean, most of that is having a fantastic script, obviously, but a great filmmaker at the helm, and having someone a director who would take me on that journey as well.
Who we will name now. Of course, that film is directed by Sam Taylor Wood, now Sam Taylor Johnson, your wife, and whom you have a terrific family with. Something that John Lennon, I'm sure the down-to-earth romantic who also worked with his partner in life and his soulmate would appreciate. That film must be so special to you for so many reasons, obviously, because of Sam, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's where I met my wife, and but it's probably where I was pushed and challenged the most as an actor, and with kind of preparation and focus, and real sort of character to get to grips with, holding the weight of a name like Lennon, I guess, many kind of things to it, but yeah, it was one of the it's probably one of the proudest films that I've made.
It is a beautiful film. So you were neither a singer nor a guitar player on that film. Were you a comic book kid when you got the lead in Kick-Ass? And we should note this if people don't know it, but for posterity, that Kick-Ass, in addition to being a verb and an adjective, is also the name of your character's alter ego in that terrific film. Were you up on the culture of comics when you went for the audition for that?
No, I wasn't. No, yeah, it was a world. Yeah, that I definitely wasn't grasped into. I mean, the irony is that I've now done quite a few sort of comic book movies.
Have you gone back to read some? Have you gone, oh, this is what they were all talking about at 17 when I was...
Yeah, no, I mean, I do, obviously, I read them purely just for the character. Yeah, Kick-Ass was interesting because, and I think as well at the time, only maybe one little issue was, one or two issues were out of Kick-Ass. So I actually read Mark Millar's Wanted and things like that earlier, sort of graphic novels and things, to kind of get the kind of tone of what he's like. But yeah, it was interesting. That was kind of great actually to be kind of coming out at the same time as the comic book.
Right. Right, and also at the same time as Nowhere Boy it sort of had that sort of 1-2 punch, no pun intended. But there's also a lot of insane physical stuff in there to kind of make that leap. That must have been a revelation as well. Sort of the sense of here's another aspect to acting, another level to bring you to of really difficult physical stuff, a whole other aspect to acting in another dimension, right?
The comic book world, is that what you're saying? The
Yeah,
genre and the whole kind
physicality
of
it, yeah, the roughhousingness, the the real physical stuff that's involved in a movie like that.
yeah, it was interesting. I mean, actually, I guess for that character, I actually physically didn't need to be able to do, you know, martial arts or anything like that. So essentially, he's not really your typical superhero. He's just sort of, very. He's a comic book reader himself, um, and a kid who aspires to be, his own little superhero and live out his fantasy. It was interesting. It was really interesting for me to. I felt like it was probably my first real American role. I can't remember playing American before that, so it was the first time I kind of was was going to be seen in an American role, and which I think which was interesting for when it came out because I was so far from who I played. But throw me some questions.
That actually brings up an
confused a
interesting
little
idea
bit.
because you on screen you never really got a chance to really kind of play a teenager. Kick-Ass and Kick-Ass 2 are sort of your opportunities to do that. John Lennon not being the typical teenager in Liverpool 1955, and then you pretty much went quickly into adult roles that we'll talk about in a moment. That's an interesting thing that Kick-Ass and Kick-Ass 2 are your teenagerhood on film in a way, right?
Right, yeah, I guess the first one was able to kind of jump into there a lot easier than the second time because a lot had changed in my life personally to then kind of go back to playing something like that. But that became the obstacle and the challenge in a sense to kind of see if I can kind of pick up where I last left and people could instantly go, oh, nothing's changed about that guy, which was kind of a challenge in itself. Whereas someone like, say, Chloe had obviously changed physically in over that time, so and was on a different journey and trajectory in the movie. So, but it was great for me. I mean, Matthew Vaughn's a great filmmaker, and it was a huge opportunity to have humor, action, emotion. It was a whole other entity.
Well, in 2011, then you went like lightning into a trio of dramatic films that are all really all terrific, including appearing opposite Glenn Close and Mia Wasikowska in Albert Nobbs. That's an interesting performance because in many ways your character Joe represents sort of like an emotionally stunted, kind of dulled masculinity in a film where masculinity is itself a performance. It's sort of a conceit. As you're kind of approaching the role, how did you look at it in that way? Because you've got obviously Glenn and Janet McTeer's characters are living their lives as men and they're women. What was it like to kind of approach that role?
Well, I love this. This is really interesting for me, by the way, to kind of try and go back and remember what I've done because I'll see it. We'll do it the premiere, what have you, and then I move on. And realistically, the experience is everything to me. Is when I'm doing it. But yeah. So there was. I think I can't remember what was the attraction originally. If it was just being able to play a character that I've never done before, if it was more like the sort of like I play a lot of scumbag, sort of Irish, just kind of thief. I can't really quite remember, but I sort of wing my way into a hotel and fall in love with this girl, and but I think it was more. That film just felt. Sometimes there are films that come around and there are characters that speak to you, and then sometimes there are films that are like someone else's passion project. It was Glenn Close's real passion project that she's been wanting to get off the ground. I think it felt like a team spirit. Like we all, Mia Wachowska came in, and it was sort of an ensemble of actors that I was just admired and wanted to work with. And there were some interesting scenes and things like that. I can't really indulge in what happens because I can't remember.
Well, it was great. I'm sure it's okay. It was great. I'm sure to be part of somebody's dream like that, since Glenn had obviously been planning for so many years. Then in 2012, you did Savages, directed by the hyper-masculine Oliver Stone. You played the dreadlocked pot grower named Ben, who with his buddy Chan, played by Taylor Kitsch, gets in hot water with a Mexican drug cartel. Now, Ben is sort of the decent one of the group. He doesn't want to kill people. He wants to do some good. He's pretty much the only person in the movie who feels that way. What did you learn from working with Oliver Stone? What was that experience like?
Oh my God, I learned everything, I think, from Oliver. I really, truly, that was a real game changer in my career. Not maybe from an outside perspective, but for me internally, what I physically and emotionally went through on that was a grueling shoot. It was intense. Oliver Stone is an incredible filmmaker, a genius, and it was challenging. It wasn't an easy shoot. But that doesn't mean it wasn't one of the best, things. It was. I like challenge. I like controversy, and I like, I need that to kind of power us through. But someone like Oliver he's someone who just soaks up knowledge, and he. It's hard to keep up. He speaks 10 conversations at once. So, and if you've missed a beat, then he won't go back again. So, you had to. He's got an incredible energy, and I think that's what his films have. And they have a darkness, and they have, they also have kind of sensitivity to it. He's quite incredible how he does that, but he is someone that doesn't do things by half. So, on that set, we had, I played a marijuana drug dealer, so we had a marijuana drug dealer on set, and we had a hacker who's one of the most intense hackers. He's just done Snowden, and he just worked on that also. We had a, great hacker. We had DEA agents. We had witness protection people really early on. We had I remember once I remember arriving to Los Angeles. I've just my wife and I just had our first child, and she might have been one, but I think she turned 1 when I made that movie, and Sam was pregnant with our next child, and when I arrived to Los Angeles, we found a home that we could be comfortable in, and then he sent a package, about a folder this sort of size, that I just had, a care package for me, and I just left it on the side for a couple of days whilst we were unpacking, and I finally got around to, and this is just in the kitchen living room area, and I finally got around to opening the first page, and it was like disfigured, like cartel chopped off heads and just pages upon pages of like artifacts of drug dealers and cartel members and most hideous disturbing images that I had just lying around our very innocent pure home, but that's kind of Oliver. He sort of bypasses that. It's just indulge yourself in the facts and the knowledge, and to see where we can grasp and take it in. And it was great having all those people on. And I went around and went in and out of drug dealers' houses in Los Angeles, and little modest homes, and then would go into their cupboard. The house on the outside would look quite big, and then you go in and go, "Oh, this is like a TARDIS. It's really quite small. Like, this is really bizarre." And I go, "Oh, and then we go in through that cupboard and then through a little door, and then we go into their UV light freaking, weed dome of like marijuana, and then and it was quite incredible. I mean, it was the most bizarrest thing. And I think, like you sort of take on, these things are like, you take this aura of that energy on, and it's not always that great. It's like this sort of, it takes a long time to shed it after a movie. But I remember I decided that, well, like maybe in these scenes I'd have dreadlocks or something, and I felt like maybe I'd some sort of tribal. I think he comes back from some part of Africa or something, and he's been with these tribal people and that, and I was looking at dreads or something. It wasn't supposed to be a Rastafari thing. It was more a spiritual. I can't remember what tribe we were looking at anyway. It's beside the point. We got dreads, and I remember, I don't know, we're in Hollywood, so we've asked for like a flashy convertible, Audi convertible or something, and I literally looked like a drug dealer. I literally was driving around Los Angeles, and I remember getting pulled over numerous times to ask for my, not doing anything wrong, but with the rooftop down, dreadlocks high, and I'm like, it just, and I was probably 22 or something. I don't know. So, it's bizarre when I look back.
You didn't have the package from Oliver in the car at that point, did you, with the severed heads and
No.
whatever?
I mean, it was mad. It was really mad. But I mean, listen. Part of those are just funny little stories on the outside. I mean, what I learned from it was actually, I had people around me like John Travolta and Benicio del Toro, and phenomenal actors. And watching Benicio del Toro take a scene off the page was everything. I don't know. It was like just seeing just genius happen right in front of you. It was he's incredible. He's great at intimidation scenes without being without fear. I don't know. He was incredible. You learn a lot from your peers around you, and I thank Oliver for pushing us through really dark, heavy times. It wasn't easy, but I think he's actually quite a lovely soul. He gets down to it. He's quite sweet.
Then came Joe Wright's extraordinary Anna Karenina, which, like Nowhere Boy, is a multiple BAFTA nominee. You play Count Vronsky, a man both dashing, and I believe Weasley might be the word Tolstoy would use, because you terrifically capture. There's a description of him in the book that I always love, where he says, one must pay one's gambling debts, but not one's tailor, which I think is sort of a terrific maxim in life. But you captured this sort of both the charming aspect of Vronsky and the aloof aspect of him. What was it like playing a character from classic literature? Was it difficult? Did it have?
No. I mean, I think, and someone like Tolstoy as well. I mean, that was pretty hefty stuff, man, and intimidating. But Tom Stoppard wrote the screenplay, adapted the book to a screenplay, and it was just moving and so incredibly beautiful, and it as much knowledge you can get from obviously the book, and you take that and then you really just work from the script. But on top of all that, obviously, Joe Wright had this really artistic way of being able to. He wanted to. Kind of express emotion through dance, and so it was interesting, and that kind of became the kind of the intrigue and the challenge, and and he had mega backdrops and sets, and it was very sort of indulging in the aesthetic and the physicality of everything. So it was interesting. It was an interesting way of being able to, and I'm from a dance background as well. So I was always, and I think the funny thing is he cast that from a music video that my wife and I did for REM.
Berlin, right? Is that
Berlin, yeah. Which I don't know many if you've anyone seen that, but it's a kind of a liberating kind of piece of just sort of of mad dance Tourette's down the back streets of London, and it's weirdly been the only thing that kind of has got me a lot more work from that than anything I've done. Everyone's like, but it's that thing that you did, that dance thing. It's just so like there's no sort of there's no vanity to it. There's just raw and it's like open and expressive but those are the sort of things I make with my wife. So that's what I gotta find.
There's a terrific moment there where you're sort of imitating a squirrel. There's an etching of a squirrel on a wall, and you're sort of dancing like a squirrel.
Yeah.
But it's really a great video.
And the thing is, like that wasn't something that was. It was just there was a squirrel graffiti artwork on the wall, and a moment to take in the environment around us and just work. That's what kind of being artistic and being that's acting. Kind of is just improvisation, off the cuff, instinctual humor. Like it was just that was so lovely to do. But Joe cast me really from that, and so. But I think it's the only time. I'll be honest. It's the only time I actually I learned a lot from doing those two films back to back. I'll never do it again because I need time to digest what I've just done, and I need time to prep the next thing. And and then there needs to be a break in between those two because I need to be me and I need to live my life and figure out who I am again and sort of rebalance, ground myself, But at the time, these were two great opportunities, and I took them, Anna Karenina actually and Oliver Stone, they came around the same time. I got offered at the same time, but they just so happened to go one in front of the other. But I was literally, the day I was at the ending of Savages, where I think I'm shot through the neck or something, or blood. I'm covered in blood from my head right down to my toes. And the day I wrapped was the same day I got on a flight, flew over to London, and was started shooting, and I still had blood stains all the way down the back of my leg, and I'm putting on this like white suit, and I'm putting on a wig, and I just shaved the rest of this bit off, and I was starting to grow out a mustache for this, and it was this weird blend. So and then I had to play this from this sort of drug dealing hippie kind of role, American Cali dude, to Russian, Tolstoy's Count Vronsky, and very petite and carried, and this kind of, and I don't, it gets a lot of praise, and it was critically did really well. But as from my personal experience of doing that was just it was relentless, and it wasn't giving myself the best quality of I didn't give myself the opportunity to do better, and that's that.
We mentioned comic books before with Kick-Ass. You did another one, a much more serious one, in the blockbuster Avengers sequel, Age of Ultron, which I actually think is a terrific movie. But your performance, in particular, as Pietro Maximoff, as Quicksilver, there is an aspect, we're going to talk about that and Godzilla kind of combined, because I think there's an art to the blockbuster. And I think that I've said this a couple of times about comic book movies, which is that they're like the westerns of this era. Just like the westerns were in the 50s and 60s. You're going to have high and you're going to have low. And anything with Marvel is generally going to be on the high end. And one thing that you bring to that character is sort of a sense that, to my eyes, felt like he was like a refugee survivor from a war-torn country. Like that character really has a lot of depth and pain going on in him. How did you approach that? And then we'll kind of segue from that to Godzilla.
Yeah, well, I think that was Joss's kind of interpretation of being able to set it in a world that we all know today. I think there's obviously that is constantly going on, and people want to kind of turn a blind eye to refugees and what have you. And I think and it just fit perfectly for these two characters, and then and how they wanted to kind of pull perspective on, incorporate the world in Avengers, and kind of look back and think of, Avengers is America, and what do we, and see everyone's perspective. So it was an interesting angle, and I think it's trying to be edgy and controversial, and it's smart, but obviously everyone knows it's a commercial blockbuster movie, so you can only indulge so much in politics and everything, and economics, and I think but the funny thing about Avengers, Marvel, it's a big entity. It's a machine. It's a studio in itself, and I always think it's really interesting though what Marvel did, because Marvel as a studio only makes their own movies. They only make their own characters in Marvel, so they care. It's an interesting. Most studios can make big blockbuster movies, but their main goal is to make a lot of money. And yeah, I'm not saying Marvel isn't, and there's a big franchise element to it, but they actually want to make a lot more movies. So they really do care about their characters, and they care about how they're going to be seen. And so you actually got a collaborative process instantly with the producers in the studio, which was really quite lovely. And but the process starts a good year and a half before they even start making a movie. So I was approached by Joss before I'd even started shooting Godzilla the year before. So.
And Godzilla was a lot of fun to make, I'm assuming, right? That was a challenge, but it was also probably a bit of a kick. It was something new for you to do.
Yeah, no, Godzilla was. Well, I'll just jump back, because Joss. What was interesting was that there was a comic book that we worked from for Avengers. There is a series that they were using, and there were a few things that were really important to me that I was able to look like the character, and he had white hair, and I wanted to sound Eastern European, because that's where Sokovia was set. It was set somewhere in Eastern Europe, and Joss immediately said, absolutely, I want you to do what you do, and that's great, and that's why I come to you, but we'll have to screen test that, and we'll have to try those out, and there's a process, and and it was interesting, and we ended up the way we wanted it to be, but it was but that was great. And yeah, Godzilla just before that was a big move. It was a big move for me. I already struggled a bit with the idea that the more I did, the sort of success that comes with acting. Like I said, I started when I was really young, so it kind of came from a pure feeling of just passion and love, and the other side of it, the attention and the what have you, comes with it. I had to learn along the way, and it's something I find uncomfortable and sometimes intrusive and what have you, and you just deal with it, and you have to learn it. So I kind of avoided any big movie before that point. And I know Kick-Ass was big, but it was independently funded, right? It was not a studio movie. So that was kind of like the first realm, and then I closed down a bit. I was like, this is I got a bit self-destructive and was a bit. It wasn't for me, and I wanted to just stick on a trajectory of just smaller movies, independent films. And Godzilla came around, and firstly I was just like this, like, am I, as if I'm gonna do Godzilla and whatever, that's some monster movie kind of thing. And I thought that when my manager told me about it, I just laughed, and no, but honestly, what else have we got around? What else can we do? And but then it was the filmmaker. Gareth Edwards was the real pull, and at the time, that year he just brought out a movie. What was it called? Monsters, right? Was it called Monsters?
That's right.
That he shot for barely anything, and and it was incredible. Scoot McNairy, I think, is the lead in that, and he's incredible. And I just remember it just being so beautifully shot and well directed, and like it was improvised. Was it improvisation or was that? I couldn't. I knew that moment. I was like, okay, wait, let me sit down with him and let me hear what he has to say, which is another eye opener, by the way. I didn't know this is a really interesting new thing I've learned. Is that, and all these jobs I've taken, you learn something. There was no script. It was a big blockbuster monster movie, but it's the filmmaker. It really is. It always comes down to the filmmaker, and I'm always intrigued now. No matter what, you kind of got to take these things without judgment and criticism, and I was too quick to be cynical and what have you. And and the guy's a genius. I think the guy's the sweetest, loveliest guy. He's modest and humble, but we were supposed to have a 30-minute meeting, and it turned into 6 hours of us just pulling apart ideas, and because there was no script, so he was just like talking about character and where I want to take you, and and it was so collaborative in this working with him that it just felt like I don't know. It was a new jump, and it also I also felt for the first time. After taking that big breather, probably after Oliver Stone and Joe Wright's film, having a chance to get back to just being me and with my wife and kids, and just grounded, and it gave me a chance to feel. I felt loved and secure. I feel security and love in my family, and I think at that point I felt like, okay, I'm ready to. I'm ready to take on a lead role in the next monster, big legendary movie. And that demanded some kind of responsibility. When you walked on set, it was different. It was like I've got there was a different kind of role to play, and I had a great time. And it was shot by Seamus McGarvey, who, by the way, I've worked with 4 times now. So he did Nowhere Boy. Godzilla, Anna Karenina, and Nocturnal Animals. So,
well, speaking of Nocturnal Animals, because one of the things we were talking about a couple of minutes ago in terms of genre films, and I think the genre films can have a soul, and Ray Marcus, your character in Nocturnal Animals, really does not have a soul, which is part of the point. This beautiful film, it is so extraordinary. One of the things about it is, to my eye, it's about brutality in art and about emotional brutality in life, and how sometimes the latter can bleed into the former. God, how did you approach this very, very dark character, and where did you want to go with it? Where did you see it going?
I don't think I approached it. It approached me. I think Tom rather flatteringly called to say I'm interested in you for my second film, and I was instantly thrilled and flattered and excited, and then when I read the role that he thought of me, I was kind of perplexed as to why. Wait, so you want me to be a psychopath and a rapist and a murderer? Yeah. Okay, all right.
In a story within a story, we should probably, without giving anything away, there's a story within the story of Nocturnal Animals, which is where Aaron's character is, and it is there's a lot to it.
Yeah, no, it's complex. Listen, it took me some time to compress that role, because it wasn't instantly relatable, or anything that I've said to you so far today that you need to connect with the character. It was the opposite, and that's why it became the challenge. That became the thing of like, well, all right, well then go to what I know best is work with the filmmaker. What's his vision for it? How does he see this being? And we created something that I felt happy doing, and I actually felt more. I mean, maybe I didn't really know. You never really know if things work or not. But what I felt was actually more important than that. It was. I felt secure with Tom Ford, who directed the movie. He made me feel like I put my full trust in him, and I was able to therefore just explore and play. The character I play is not only a fictional character, but a part of figment of Amy Adams' imagination. She's reading this book within the film called Nocturnal Animals that her ex-husband, or ex-partner, has sent her, and it's this violent, visceral metaphor for their breakup. So you kind of go back into flashbacks of their journey and them falling in love with each other whilst you're reading this horrific, dark thriller set in West Texas. Whilst there's, it's really intense and really poetically done and really beautiful, and what Tom's done is very ambitious, but it's incredible. But there was room for my character. So I'm this character in the story. There was room for my character to be very elaborate, and Tom wanted someone that was very overbearing and magnetic, and to contrast with this very stark, sterile world, this contemporary world that we see Susan, Amy Adams, in. And my character, it wasn't just he's a villainous character. It was kind of, he was this very charismatic, charming, but unpredictable, and therefore dangerous kind of animal in a way.
It's a very American character in so many ways, actually. That mocking sort of comical quality in some ways, that bigger than lifeness sort of makes him sort of a very, very American. The character also reminds me in so many ways of Anthony Hopkins in Silence of the Lambs or Dennis Hopper in Blue Velvet. There's sort of, it kind of joins the pantheon of great movie villains without
Awesome.
Yeah.
Tom's
the case, yeah.
Tom's inspirations for that role was Jack Nicholson in The Shining and Travis Bickle from Taxi Driver, De Niro.
Yeah.
Just sort of electric and like magnetic and just fucking frightening, and just like, because there was just unpredictable, like didn't know what they were going to do next, and he wanted that kind of frantic energy and that kind of kooky kind of unsettling feeling. And that was interesting. It was, by the way, it's scary to do something like that where you're like, whoa, I'm gonna be crazy and kooky and wild and I'm, but you at some point you let go and you allow. How Tom directs is that he's very specific and precise and knows exactly what he wants. So there was room and freedom to be improvise and play, but in that, though, he made boundaries and limitations, and so that it was interesting.
Yeah, well, it is an extraordinary and challenging film. People will find out when it opens here November 18th. To wrap up, Aaron, you are kind of decided that you're going to be doing one film a year, really, just to kind of spend more time with your family, kind of choosing that one film carefully. How is your process going to be? It must become so much more paramount to really look at every role as this is going to be the one this year. How important is it going to be to really narrow it down?
Yeah, I mean, and it's not a mad challenge like you'd think. I mean, I've done it for the last 5 years now. I've done one thing a year for the last 5. I think maybe from that momentous 2 movies back to back, and what it really did enable me to be able to give to my craft. But I think also what you're going to touch upon is something about escapism, and that's kind of what acting was for me until I felt, until I had a family. Yeah. There was no reason to escape anymore, and so for most of my childhood, obviously, I was jumping from one job to the next, and that was the lifestyle, and I meet these people, and and then you move on, and a very sort of self-destructive kind of world. But I don't feel that anymore. I don't feel the ambition. I don't feel like I'm not doing enough, and I don't feel like I need to do more, and I don't feel like I've got to do it for anybody else but myself, and that's a beautiful feeling, and I can only get that because I've got such love and support in my wife and my family. But And I've got such a great, and I actually enjoy being a parent. So why I don't really want to take most of my time up doing, but yeah, no, you want to work with people that you admire and love. I want to work with great filmmakers. I want interesting characters. Yeah, they firstly don't come around that often. Secondly, yeah, they got to really speak to me. They really got to feel like it's worth spending 3 to 6 months of my year in indulging in this and putting everyone else on hold and dealing with this. I mean, it's not easy. I just playing Nocturnal Animals, playing a psychopathic character. I mean, it's like first 3 months I was growing my hair out, my beard and my nails, and I'm watching and reading documentaries. I'm studying characters like Jeffrey Dahmer and Ted Bundy, and watching documentaries on these guys that pick up mannerisms, and I'm picking up dirty habits like smoking and drinking because I actually want to feel toxic from the inside out, and I want to feel like I want to look like my skin's like sickly and pale, and I want to, that's what I enjoy about the process of acting now. That's what I enjoy about. And the last role I did with Doug Lyman, I play a sniper guy, and I spent 4 or 5 nights in Arkansas on a military base with sniper guys and spotters, so, and I have time for that now, and I also spend enough time at home to feel like I can warrant giving myself that space and time to try and indulge in something artistic and creative, and not feel like I'm drawn between the two and be like, so much. So that's a nice feeling. That, and I support my wife in what she does, and I step back, and my wife's just been I've been in New York for the last 3 months. My wife's directed a new Netflix series called Gypsy with Naomi Watts. She set the whole series up and the tone and shot the first 2 episodes. And I love and enjoy that. I love just being back at home and with the kids and being able to support her in her love and her joy. It's very empowering for me to see her empowered and being and doing what she loves doing. And we got girls, and I feel like they need to grow up knowing that their mother is a role model to them. They can do what they love doing, and we're all here as a family and a unit to support one another.
It's all about the balance of time, isn't it? Just picking that family time versus career time. We're so happy that you have taken the time with us tonight.
Thank you very much for staying.